Over the last several decades, the Christian church has become less and less influential in our culture. Polls and surveys consistently point to a decline in regular weekend attendance, even if those surveys disagree as to the rate of the decline. And one of the reasons I believe this is happening is because we have forgotten who we are and consequently why we exist. Who am I is a question with which many people struggle. But it's worth the struggle because if we are able to determine who we are much more likely to discern how we can be of use to God. Last year, I offered a workshop designed to help people discover who they are by taking a look at their spiritual gifts, their personality types, their passions, and more. Participants were able to figure out how they might likely be of use to God while achieving happiness and fulfillment in their own lives. Who am I and why am I here are important questions. And they are the questions which Jesus focuses on from the outset in his Sermon on the Mount by using a couple metaphors, the first of which is salt of the earth. Throughout my life, I have listened to one preacher after another try to make sense of this passage, but I never felt completely satisfied with any explanation. The explanations were usually flawed, some more than others, and none of them really explained how salt could lose its saltiness, as Jesus claimed. But then I stumbled upon the writings of Bible scholar John Pilch, who makes a good and sound case for what he believes Jesus was really saying and how it would have been received by the first century peasants to whom he was preaching. To fully grasp the image of salt of the earth, you have to understand there existed in ancient Israel, as well as modern day Israel, outdoor ovens made of earth. You also have to understand that in the Aramaic and Hebrew languages which Jesus spoke, the same word is used for earth and clay oven. So when Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," the case can be made that he meant you are the salt of the clay oven. Now that may seem even more confusing unless you realize that the common fuel for the oven would not have been wood, which was a scarce commodity, but rather camel or donkey dung. And it was the job of the young girls in the family to collect the dung, mix salt in it, and shape it into patties to be left in the sun to dry. And when someone was ready to bake a loaf of bread, for instance, a slab of salt was placed in the base of the oven, and the patties were placed on top of the slab. And as it turns out, the slab of salt acts as a kind of catalyst, making dung patties burn hotter and more completely than they would otherwise do. Over time, though, the slab of salt in the bottom of the oven loses its catalytic abilities, so it's tossed out and a new salt slab is placed in the oven. So Jesus is telling his audience, they are like the salt in the earth ovens. They trigger the holy fire of God that burns bright and hot in the hearts of everyone. And if they lose their reason for being, if they forget who they are, they may as well be tossed out because they are good for nothing. And continuing with this fire image, Jesus tells the crowd that not only are they the ones who ignite the fire, but they are the fire itself. You are the light of the world. I have to wonder what it might have felt like for these poor illiterate peasants to hear that they had the power to make a difference, a big difference in their world. Jesus wasn't saying this was something they needed to work towards. He didn't say, strive to become the salt of the earth and the light of the world. He said, you already are salt and light. You already have within you the ability to do something new and big in the world. So just be who you are. Don't hide yourself under a bushel basket. Let your light shine brightly for everyone to see. If you do this, you will be the agents of transformation that the world so desperately needs. The church needs to hear these words today more than ever before. Sometimes I think we've forgotten who we are. Sometimes I think we imagine that our reason for being is to get more people in the pews and more money in the offering plate. Sometimes I think that we hold back from speaking our truth because we are afraid we might offend someone. Sometimes I think we feel as if there is so much chaos and injustice in the world that our small acts of resistance won't make a difference. I'm sure those were probably some of the thoughts that must have been running through the heads of Jesus' audience. But Jesus told them if they live authentically as the catalyst they were created to be, then they can start a fire that will sweep across the land, a fire that creates a new world. And if they live authentically as the light that they were created to be, then they can light the path for others to see, and they can offer hope where there is none. And if you're wondering what it looks like when a light shines in the darkness, then refer back to this morning's first reading from the book of Isaiah. God, speaking through the prophet, condemns the empty religious rituals of the people, pointing out how they fast while at the same time quarreling among themselves and oppressing the workers. This isn't the kind of religion that honors God. Instead, religion should loose the bonds of injustice and bring a sense of freedom to the oppressed. It should inspire us to share our food with the hungry, house the homeless, and clothe the naked. And when we practice this sort of religion, that's when our light breaks forth like the dawn, according to the prophet's words, and our healing quickly springs up. I suspect that Jesus may have had this very scripture passage in mind when he talked about letting your light shine. You and I live in a culture where religion is being misused as an excuse to discriminate against and harm others. It's nothing new. In the 1960s, we saw objections to laws requiring integration in restaurants because of sincerely held beliefs that God wanted the races to be separate. We saw religiously affiliated universities refuse to admit students who engaged in interracial dating. Today, religiously affiliated schools fire women because they become pregnant while not married. Business owners refuse to provide insurance coverage for contraception for their employees. Graduate students training to be social workers refuse to counsel LGBT people. And bridal salons, photo studios, and reception halls close their doors to same-sex couples planning their weddings. That's what the Christian church looks like today. So it's no wonder attendance is declining. Anyone with the ability to reason can see that that is not true religion, and so they are walking out the doors in record numbers. It's during these troubled times in which we live that I believe Jesus' words are most needed when we hear, "You are the catalyst for making a difference in the world. And you are the light shining bravely and brightly in the darkness." We each do it in our own way, but we each must do it. This Thursday, I will be joining other religious leaders from different faith traditions for a press conference in Austin to speak out in support of full equality for LGBT Texans and to denounce efforts to pass legislation that discriminates against the LGBT community. It will be my goal to shine the light on opponents of equality in Texas who use religion to justify anti-transgender legislation, discriminatory laws masquerading as religious freedom, or other attempts to treat the LGBT community as second class. This is what I can do. The question for you today is, what can you do? How can you be a catalyst that ignites the fire of God's holy light? And how can you be that light? It's a question each of us must answer. So think about it. Pray about it. And never let an opportunity go by without shining the light of God on it. Amen.